Good morning or good afternoon to the brothers and sisters there of the ITF Road and Rail. Sorry I can't be there today. I fully intended to turn up, but I've been sick and a doctor advised me to give it a rest, at least for a little bit. Australia's a long way from everywhere. As the old joke goes, fly for 2 hours, that's what we do every morning to go and get the bread and the milk. But it is a long way. But that wasn't the reason that stopped me, ill health was. I am sorry I'm not there because this is an extraordinarily important conference, and I'd like to congratulate David and Macurata for putting it together, getting such an important group of delegates that will be able to consider, and it's proper that they consider the policy going forward, and will shape a policy that is both in support of their membership, the industries that they work in, and also the international brotherhood and sisterhood of transport workers, so that we can actually formulate real policies to deal with the global industries that we're engaging with. There's an exciting time for the ITF. We've got a new acting General Secretary to start next year, Steve Cotton. That was unanimously supported by the Executive Board. These things don't happen accidentally. They happen because of maturity in the existing leadership of the ITF, and also a determination by people to ensure that the incumbent leadership have the best possible opportunities to lead workers in a way that can affect real change. So congratulations, Steve. I know you're sitting there, and I know the priority that you put on the road and rail sections and how important you see alongside your team in London and in the regions around the world that this conference is able to make the determinations required to take us forward. Like I say, there's been a lot going on in the ITF. We've been through extensive restructuring. We need to release resources so that every section of the ITF is able to gain traction in a global sense, in a national sense, in a regional sense, and in a local sense. For you comrades and sisters and brothers there today, that means in the area of urban transport, ensuring that the big urban densities that are now characterising the way human beings live across the world are properly organised, that are conducive to functional working lives and leisure lives, that able priority quality means of transport and community transport. That means decent infrastructure, to be able to defend job sites for privatisations and those types of economic modelling that aren't about best practice. They're actually about just carving out a little bit more money to the elites that have proven their incapacity to deal with those resources. That's what the global financial crisis was about. It was really the success of greed and corruption and negligence over proper governance, proper organisation and community values. No one is going to deliver the needs of our communities, whether it's urban transport or in freight forwarding or in any other aspects of our transport life, unless we do it through the labour movement. As was shown in the United States recently, there is a clear differentiation in political leadership. There is one continuing mandate, that is, that let the market rule. Let free trade do what it wants. Let laissez-faire market politics dominate. Well, it failed. It failed to the extent of the largest loss of wealth ever measured in the history of humanity, that are plunging generations of working men and women and their families in continents all over the world, in Europe and in Northern America, in South America, in Africa, and across Asia, into a long-term future of unemployment or underemployment, casual work and precarious work, lack of investment opportunities, generating better communities. Now we have to tackle that. We have to have the determination within our family, our critical family of transport workers, to take the big issues on. And that means if we are going to transform our workplaces, and it doesn't matter if you're on moving passengers by road or by rail or by air, or you're moving cargo by sea, across the ports, on the trucks, in the intermodal rail links. We need to do it on a global basis. That's where the employment is. And the employment is in the big multinational companies that either dominate or influence the movement of both cargo and people to the extent that they get what they want. And if there is going to be mutual respect in that area, if we are going to make a difference, we need to organise across our whole transport infrastructure in a way that gets their attention and earns that respect. But we have to go further too. As Steve knows, and many in the room, particularly executive board members, we had Industrial that now represents all of the hydrocarbon, chemical workers and manufacturing workers and associated industries across the world. We had Yerke there, who's the General Secretary, young General Secretary of Industrial, and we had Phil Jennings from uni that is in the service industries that provides support for all of those industries in that area of employment. Also they're saying, let's make a difference. Let the international trade union movement come together and identify that it doesn't matter whether the cargo comes from the mines, whether it's coal or hydrocarbon. When it's shipped down the rail, when it's shipped down the road, when it comes across the port, when it's loaded on the ships and it goes to new ports in different countries and is shipped across the port, into the trucks, onto the rail, into the manufacturing centres, and then back in onto rail, back into road, back to the ports, back to the ships, and then distributed across retail across the world, that they are facing proper industrial campaigns. Well thought out, targeted, strategic, cohesive across industries. And we've got a special responsibility in the ITF to be able to deliver that important leverage we have in the area of freight forwarding in particular, when we talk about the market and market failures, so that the transport of these goods, the driver of wealth in the world that we know it, trade, is done in the hands of unionised workers, are done in the hands of working men and women that have decent employment, that have a right to bargain, that are able to freely associate with unions without prejudice and without attack, and have, most importantly, the political and governance support to have decent work. And the recent election in the US just determined again the polarisation of this world. There were no lessons learnt by international capital during the global financial crisis. Mitt Romney was out there as a merchant banker prosecuting the same case. Leave it to the market, leave it to the banks, leave it to the financiers. We'll look after your interests. Fortunately, the people of the United States made a determination. We don't want the merchant bankers determining our futures. We don't want the hedge fund determining our futures. We don't want these elite instruments of financial capital exploiting the circumstances through false investment and by a whole process of enlarging something for their own enlargement, and often to the diminishing of the workforce and the human beings that work there and the communities that rely on it, and made a proper political connection. That won't happen without strong unions. We're not able to get the attention of the peoples that are making policy and legislation unless we have strong unions, unless we can work across sections of the ITF, sections of industry, and we can genuinely challenge these things in a real way, in a way that's going to make a meaningful difference to the working men and women we represent. So it's an exciting time to be there. It's an exciting time to be in Toronto and be part of a movement that is looking outward and forward, that is organising globally, that is organising more effectively across the sections, but are doing it in a way that will build capacity and be able to challenge those same values, those elitist values that brought the world to its economic knees and continues to do so, particularly in areas of Europe and North America, as I said before. Comrades, sisters and brothers, there have been great achievements in our ITF. The Flag of Convenience campaign relies on active port workers, supporting those seafarers that are beyond the legislative grasp of national legislation. Increasingly, those dock workers are coming under pressure because of their militant and progressive policies of support of seafarers. We need to reach further down the freight forwarding line, onto the roads, into the rail, making sure that every part of that freight forwarding chain, back to mines, into manufacturing, into retail, are unionised at every level, where decent conditions of employment prevail, where workers know that they can have economic and industrial and political independence from the great economic, commercial and political power of their employers. This is a great challenge for us, to renew our international movement at a time that it is so greatly depleted. The levels of trade union capacity, the numbers of people in trade unions have never been less for generations. In all of our areas of responsibility, trade union density is coming down. Trade union resources are diminishing. The ability to fight the campaigns, the ability to integrate the great humanity, our greatest resource, our humanity around the values that are so important to us and our families. This is the challenge of our generation of leadership. It will only be done on our watch. We're not going to have the giants of Labor history riding in to save us. There won't be a new generation of young working transport union officials and activists unless we do something about it now, unless we organise, unless we educate, unless we integrate our strategies together, both with inside the ITF and with the labour movement more generally. And we've had great successes, as I've said. In my country, Bob Nanver and Tony Sheldon are there. We work very closely to integrate all of our transport strategies in this big country with a low population, the fourth largest shipping task in the world, that exports enormous amounts of wealth to other countries through trade. We determined that the best way to have strategies in rail, in road, in urban transport, in aviation, as I said, no one knows more acutely than me how far we are by aeroplane to virtually everyone everywhere in the world, would be done by joint effort, would be done by cross-sectional organisation, would be done by strategic targeting of corporations. And it doesn't matter whether it was DHL or it was Asiano and Patrick's, the big stevedore in this country, or was one of the global network terminal operators owned by Maersk, APM, or Hutchinson out of Hong Kong, or the Port of Singapore Authority, that are increasingly becoming vertically and horizontally integrated across all freight forwarding modes. It didn't matter what the target was. The three unions in Australia would come together in a federation and develop a strategy that would take workers across those sections forward. That's how fair rates and safe rates legislation was delivered in Australia. This remarkable piece of legislation that through the prosecution of a campaign in the area of road transport, that you cannot run trucks and truck drivers in the ground to the extent of the carnage that was going on to the roads of Australia and across the world, let's face it, where there wasn't a capacity for employers to dominate that market to the extent of the safety, not only of the truck drivers themselves, but everybody who shared the road with them. This is a remarkable piece of legislation. This is a piece of legislation that can be delivered anywhere in the world, that can infiltrate the ILO conventions in road transport. Similarly, in the area of privatisation, we are making sure that the privatisation of rail, firstly, that it is challenged, that it is not a part of union busting or community busting, and there is a proper challenge to it. And secondly, if it does take place, it is not done and taken place on the basis of the diminishment of labour rights and the rights of the workers that work there. These are big challenges that again can be replicated in every country, in every nation represented there in Toronto. And the same with aviation. If we're going to be serious about aviation and urban transport, that is inseparable from freight transport. That is the transport at one level of the business community. There is no international management of the global economy or the global market without aviation transport, without the movement of those business passengers. And again, that is an area that we can develop strategies where our values can be heard and resonate, where our organising capacity can be seen from the bottom up and the top down. But it takes determination, it takes leadership, it takes courage and a will to go forward. We've inherited that from generations of transport workers and leaders inside our own transport unions, and inside the ITF, and inside the international labour movement generally. And again, sisters and brothers, this is our time. This is this wonderful opportunity for us to take our world forward, to take our communities forward into better lives, into some more secure jobs, into jobs that have decent working conditions, payment that can secure our retirements, so that the workers that replace us, our sons and daughters and the sons and daughters of others, can go into decent jobs and have the same capacity to build lives, to educate children, to have health, to have decent communities. We have a special responsibility in transport. We drive and move and determine the world. There is no trade, free or otherwise, fair or otherwise, without us. The only thing that stops us is our incapacity to organise ourselves intelligently, consistently, properly resourced. And again, the ITF, as President of the ITF, I'm saying to you, together with David Cockcroft and Steve Cotton and Mac Urata and all the people in the team, we are going forward with you. We need your determination, we need your voice, and we need your leadership. You need to leave Toronto and go back to the trains, back to the trucks, back into our areas of logistics, back into our areas of influence politically and industrially with this message. We not only can make the difference about how we live today and how generations of workers will live in the future, we are the difference and we're up for it. Good luck with your considerations. I'm there in spirit. I'll continue to go the journey with you, as we say in the ITF. We'll do the trip because we're not going to leave it up to anybody else. We're going to do it ourselves. Thanks, comrades.